Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back. My name is Stephanie, otherwise known as AstroKnotty, and today we're going to learn how to crochet this easy 4 granny square sweater. That's it, it's really just 4 squares seamed together, but I will also show how to do an optional turtleneck and fitted ribbed wrist cuffs. Now this is a pretty easy project, it's just 4 squares, so if you already know how to make a granny square, you can skip the majority of this video, but I try to make this as beginner friendly as possible. So this is my fitted version I am working on today. If you are making this sweater for somebody else, you will definitely need several measurements before starting. On the next slide, I have a size chart and materials chart, so feel free to pause that as needed to gather your materials and measurements. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, as I've said, it's a pretty easy project. We're just going to make 4 granny squares today for a sweater. I went ahead and did my first front panel off camera, and I made it to my shoulder to shoulder measurement. So mine is going to measure about 18 inches wide. I used about 600 grams of this super bulky weight 6 yarn and a K or 7mm hook, but you're welcome to use any weight yarn and hook size. So let's start with our granny square. If you haven't made one before, I'll try to slow down this process. But if you have made a granny square before, then just work rounds until it reaches your shoulder measurement. So start with a slip knot and chain 4. Now you're going to slip stitch into the first chain to close your loop. You can also create a magic ring, but I really like this loop method. Chain 3. This counts as your first double crochet. Insert 1 double crochet into the middle of the loop. So to do a double crochet, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook, pull through 1, pull through 2. Our first cluster is done, so you're going to chain 3. Now you're going to insert 3 more double crochet into the center of your loop. So 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to repeat this 2 more times. So chain 3, insert 3 more double crochet into the center of that loop. I like to hold onto my tail so I can weave it in as I go. And each of these 3 double crochets equals a cluster, so I will use those terms interchangeably. Chain 3, insert another cluster into the loop. Now you're going to chain 3 again and slip stitch to the beginning double crochet, so the top of this chain 3 that we started with. And that is going to close our square. So we have 4 clusters and 4 chain 3 corner spaces. Now slip stitch a couple more times until you are in that chain 3 space, so we can start our second round. And this is what it should look like. Okay, so to start round 2, we're going to be in this chain space. You are going to chain 3. This counts as your first double crochet. 2 more double crochet into that same chain space. We're going to chain 3 again and insert another cluster into the same chain space. So every corner will always have an increase, so that just means 2 clusters. So moving on to the next chain 3 space, we're going to make another increase. So insert 3 double crochet, chain 3, 3 double crochet. Now I don't like to chain 1 between my clusters on the sides. I only like to make chains in the 4 corners, but if you prefer to chain 1 between your clusters on the sides, you're welcome to. So continue this process 2 more times by inserting 3 double crochet, chain 3, 3 double crochet in the last 2 corners. And at the end of round 2, you will have 8 clusters total and 4 chain space corners. Okay, and once you get back around to the beginning, you're going to slip stitch to that chain 3 to close, and then slip stitch a couple more times until you are in that chain 3 corner space. Right, and round 2 is complete. Your granny square should start looking like this. Your first round should have 4 clusters and your second round should have 8 clusters. Now to start round 3, we're again going to have an increase in this corner. So start with a chain 3, 2 double crochet into the same chain space, chain 3, 3 double crochet into the same chain space. Now this round is different because we're going to start building clusters on the sides. So if you see the space between clusters, we're going to insert 3 double crochet there. So yeah, right between those 2 clusters of the previous round, you're going to insert 3 double crochet. And now you're back to the corner, and in that chain 3 space, insert 1 cluster, chain 3, 1 cluster. And we're just going to repeat this process all the way around with increases in the corners and 1 cluster on the side stitches. Okay, so we are working up to our next side stitch, and hopefully you can see pretty clearly that right between those previous clusters you need to insert 3 double crochet. And this is where I was talking about the chain 1 earlier. Some people like to chain 1 on the sides so that they know clearly when to insert their side clusters instead of just, moving clusters around. There's a clear chain 1 space, but I just don't think that that's necessary. But granny squares are pretty easy and everyone has their own way of doing it. So I am going to continue by inserting 1 cluster on the side and my increases in the corners, and I will meet you at the end of round 3. And again, don't forget to slip stitch that chain 3 to close and slip stitch a couple more times until you're in the chain corner space. To start round 4, we're going to do the same thing with a chain 3. This counts as your first double crochet. Insert 2 more double crochet into that same chain space. Chain 3, 3 more double crochet into that corner. Now each new round is going to add an extra side, her side cluster on each of the 4 sides. So now for round 4, you can see we have 2 clusters that we need to add. So right between those previous clusters, insert 3 double crochet. And then moving over, we need 1 more cluster on the side. And then back at the corner chain 3 space, insert your increases. So 1 cluster, chain 3, 1 cluster. And just repeat this process all the way down. Hopefully you guys are getting the hang of it by now. And I will meet you at the end. So again, increases in each of the 4 corners, and then clusters in between the previous side cluster spaces. Okay, round 4 is done for me, so I slip stitch the beginning chain 3 to close. I am slip stitching a couple more times to get to that corner space. And round 4 will end with 16 clusters total, but we're just going to repeat these rounds until this panel meets your shoulder width measurement. So we're starting with our front and our back panel for our sweater, and they need to at least meet your shoulder measurement. So you'll insert increases in the 4 corners and just regular clusters in each of the side spaces. So I'm going to work up half a more round on camera before I do some work off camera. But yeah, just starting with 3 double crochet, chain 3, 3 double crochet in this corner. And for this 5th round, I now have 3 side clusters. So you'll start to notice a pattern that each new round has 4 new total side clusters. So it's pretty repetitive. It's mindless. I do enjoy making granny squares, even though I don't make enough of them. But they're quick and easy projects. Okay, and I will meet you guys at the end of this round. Okay, so I lied. I went ahead and completed the rest of my rounds for my front and back panel. So basically, you will need to just create 2 squares to reach your shoulder width measurements. Mine's about 18 or 19 inches. And these are for our front and back panel. If you'd like, you can add extra rounds for, like a looser, oversized coverage. But also towards the end of the video, I will show you how to extend the torso length if you find that your sweater is a little too cropped. But right now, let's move on to creating our 2 squares for our sleeves. And I will show you how to do this. So for the sleeves, we're just going to work up, again, 2 identical squares. I'm not really going to voice over the process of how to make a square because I imagine you've caught on by now. But these 2 squares need to match your underarm measurements. So we're making sleeve hole openings for your arms. My underarm measurement is about 7 to 9 inches. You're welcome to add extra coverage if you want a looser sleeve opening. But again, don't worry if your square, is big enough for your arm, but not your sleeve length, because we are going to extend our sleeves later on in the video. So for now, just create your squares until it meets your underarm measurements. And basically to determine this, you're going to work rounds on your granny square. You'll lay your granny square flat and measure it. So to get my measurement of 8 inches, my square had to be 16 inches on the side, if that makes sense. So I did work up about 7 or 8 rounds. My square measures around 16 inches wide. So once you fold that in half, it'll be, your 8-inch measurement. But that's specific to me. So should be pretty easy. Like I said, just to take the measurement, you fold your granny square in half and measure it, or you can just measure one of the sides and divide that by 2 until it reaches your underarm. Okay, and I will meet you towards the end to show you what to do next. All right, and once you are done with that first sleeve panel, go ahead and make an identical second sleeve panel, and I will show you how to seam everything together. So my front and back are done, and my 2 smaller sleeves are finished. Like I said, you just can fold them in half like this to take their measurements. So mine does meet my underarm measurement, but it does not meet my sleeve length. So once I attach all my panels, I will have to extend the sleeves, which is actually a pretty easy process. But first, let's attach the front and back panels together. So you need to take these larger squares and lay them right sides facing each other. Okay, so what we're going to end up doing is creating a head opening and closing the shoulders. So we're going to make 2 separate seams to connect the shoulders and leave enough room for your head to fit through. Again, if you want an off-shoulder look, just have a larger head opening. So like I said, lay your panels like this with the wrong side showing because we want our seams on the inside. And then you can choose your own method of seaming. You can use your slip stitch, tapestry needle, single crochet stitch, however you prefer to create your seams. But I'm going to do a single crochet method. I'm going to attach my yarn and hook to that corner chain 3 space. And I'm just going to connect about 3 or 4 clusters with single crochet stitches because I kind of want a tighter head opening for my turtleneck. And that's just my preference. So that looks about good to me. All right, and then I'm just going to connect both the sides with single crochets. Okay, and I will meet you towards the end of this process. Okay, and then once you are done, repeat that for your other shoulder I actually ended up adding a couple more stitches for a tighter head opening. So I do recommend trying on your panels after you create your shoulder seams just to see if you'd like a tighter or a looser head opening. All right, now that our shoulders are connected, it is time to attach the sleeves. So lay your project down like this. You are going to need to line up the middle of your sleeve squares with the middle seam. So you want it to be identical stitch counts on both sides so that the fitting is correct. So yeah, make sure that the middle of your squares for your sleeves line up with the middle seam of the shoulders. And just again, create a seam of your preference. I'm going to do single crochet stitches again. This part gets a little tricky. Um, so just make sure that you are counting the correct amount of stitches you need to do to make both sides identical. And I'm just going and inserting a single crochet seam to connect my sleeve to my torso panels. And when I get to the shoulder seam, I like to insert a stitch directly into it just to kind of secure it and make everything line up well. And I'm going to continue on the opposite side, creating an identical seam with the same exact stitch count. So my first sleeve panel is attached, and as you can see, if you fold it in half, it starts to form, this nice sweater shape. So we're going to repeat the process again with our second sleeve panel. Make sure you line up the middle of the panel with the middle of the shoulder seam and repeat the process again. When you are done, we're going to take our sweater and we're going to connect the sides and close the arms. So we want to continue working on the wrong side, so our seams are on the inside of our sweater. But in a continuous motion, we are going to close up the side and close up the bottom of the sleeves. So I attach my yarn and hook at the bottom of one of the corners for the back and front panel. And I start by connecting the sides first. Again, just insert yarn and hook into those chain 3 corner spaces. Okay, close it and insert a single crochet stitch in each stitch along until you get to the armpit area. Okay, and once at the armpit area, definitely make some stitches to close up and connect the chain 3 corner spaces. You don't want any holes in your armpit. So I'm inserting a single crochet in both of those chain 3 corners to connect them. All right, and now we're going to turn to work along the sleeve and close the bottom of that sleeve opening. And once you get to the end of the sleeve, I like to secure it with a slip stitch in that final chain 3 corner. And you're just going to repeat this process for the opposite side, closing up that side and the underarm. And I will meet you at the end. And once you're done, weave in your ends and flip your sweater inside out. Feel free to try it on. In the next couple parts of the video, I will show you how to extend the sleeves, extend the bottom, add a turtleneck, and add some optional ribbed cuffs to the sleeves. So stay tuned. Okay, so if you need to continue adding length to your sleeves to meet your sleeve length measurements, I will show you how to do that. It's pretty easy. We're just going to create a couple of granny cluster rounds. And if this part does not apply to you, you can skip ahead. But to increase the length of your sleeves, you're going to take your yarn and hook and insert it at the seam area in one of those chain 3 corner spaces. So also I like to attach my yarn with I think it's called the fisherman's knot method. I really hate weaving in ends, so I attach my yarn this way when I can. Yeah, starting at the seam area, I'm going to work in the right chain 3. I'm going to chain 3, counts as the first double crochet, and insert 2 more double crochet into that space. Now this is at the right of the seam. Now you're going to insert 3 double crochet in that next chain space at the left of the seam. And you're going to insert 3 double crochet in each available space around. Just like we did before, we're just inserting clusters between clusters. So continue this all the way around, and I will meet you at the end. And once you get to the end, slip stitch to the beginning chain 3 to close that round. And slip stitch a couple more times until you are in the space between clusters. You're going to repeat these cluster rounds until you reach your desired sleeve length. If you would like to add cuffs, then leave, at least an inch or 2 of sleeve length left to add cuffs after this. But I'm going to repeat this round about 2 or 3 more times before I add a ribbed cuff border. So just insert a cluster between clusters, and I will meet you after I've extended my sleeve length. And my first sleeve is about done. I'm just going to fasten off here and repeat the same exact process on my opposite sleeve. Make sure you do the same rounds and stitch counts so that both of your sleeves match. And I'm going to zoom up and go a little closer this time so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm working to the right of the seam. I'm inserting a cluster into that chain space. And then to the left of the seam, I am inserting another cluster. And then I'm just going to finish this round with a cluster between previous clusters. So go ahead and repeat this process until this sleeve matches your opposite sleeve. Okay, both of my sleeves are finished, and now I'm going to show you how to add an optional ribbed border or just a cuff. This is pretty easy. We're just going to be using single crochet stitches and double crochet stitches. I did run out of yarn, so I'm going to change the color of my cuffs and border to this light gray. This is also super bulky weight 6, so I'm not going to have to change my hook size or anything. But you are going to attach your yarn and hook again to the end of your sleeves. Now this part is optional, but if you find that your sleeve opening is too wide, we can make a couple of decrease rounds to start before your cuff. I'm personally going to make at least 1 decrease round so I can close up that opening a little bit so it's tighter on my wrist. If you don't need to do these decreases, then feel free to skip this part. But otherwise, to do a decrease round, you are going to insert a single crochet in the first 3 stitches. In the next 2, you're going to make a decrease. So insert your yarn and hook into the first stitch, pull through, insert yarn and hook into the second stitch, pull through. When you have 3 loops on your hook, pull through all 3. And that is a single crochet 2 together decrease. So insert 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches. And now we're going to do another decrease. So insert, pull through, insert into the next, pull through. When you have 3 loops on your hook, pull through all 3. And we just made another decrease. So repeat this around with 3 single crochet and then a decrease in the next. And this is how we start to tighten our wrist area up a little bit before we make our ribbed border. And you can actually repeat this round as many times as you need for like a drastic decrease. But if you only need to do this once or twice, that's fine too. So when you get to the end, there might not be a perfect 3 stitches left. Just end it with a regular single crochet and slip stitch to the beginning single crochet to close. As you can see, mine's already closing in a little bit. Okay, and I do not need another decrease round, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the cuff. We're going to do front and back post double crochet stitches. So to start your ribbed cuff, you are going to chain 3. This counts as your first double crochet. Insert 1 double crochet in the next stitch and 1 double crochet in each stitch all the way around to the end. So this is the base for our ribbed cuff. And the next 2 rounds, we will do our front and back post stitches. So I will meet you at the end. And once you get to the end, slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 to close. And for round 2, you're going to chain 3. This counts as your first double crochet. In the next stitch, we're going to do a front post double crochet. So instead of inserting your yarn and hook into the top of the stitch, you're going to insert it like this to pull the front of the stitch out. And finish with a double crochet. Now in the next stitch, we are going to do a back post. So yarn over. This part gets a little awkward, but grab that stitch and pull it back. Finish with a double crochet. And you'll see that it's going to make this nice ribbed texture. So I'll try to slow it down, but in the next stitch, insert a front post, double crochet, and then afterwards, a back post. So it gets a little awkward, especially when trying to slow it down. And yeah, we'll just continue alternating those all the way around with a front post and then a back post. Okay, and once you get around to the end, you're just going to close that round by slip stitching to the top of the chain 3. And if you would like to do another round, you would just do the same thing. You would chain 3, and then you would put a front post on the front posts and a back post on the back posts. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more round on camera. Chain 3. In the next stitch, you're going to do your front post, double crochet. And in the next stitch, you're going to do your back post, double crochet. Now it's important that we put these front posts and back posts on top of each other so that it keeps the ribbing effect pretty uniform. But it's just as easy as that. It's a bunch of double crochets and it creates this really nice textured cuff. And I will meet you around at the end. And once you get to the end, don't forget to slip stitch to the beginning chain 3 to close, fasten off, and repeat for your other sleeve with the exact same stitch count. Okay, so both of my sleeves are done, and my video footage did get deleted for how to extend the bottom of your sweater. It really is the same process as the sleeves, just doing clusters in each cluster and starting around the seam area. So if you need to add more length to the bottom of your sweater, feel free to do so. In the meantime, I'm going to show you how to add this optional turtleneck. You could also just do a single crochet border around the head opening, or even a ribbed double crochet border, just like we did for the sleeve cuffs. But I'm going to do a couple granny cluster rounds so I could fold over my collar. Okay, so I am taking my yarn and hook, and I have it attached to the seam. Now, this part can get like a little tricky for the first round depending on how specific you want to be with your clusters. But I'm going to start with a granny cluster almost directly on that seam. So to the right of the seam, I'm going to chain 3. And directly into the seam, I'm going to insert a double crochet. And then to the left of the seam, I'm going to insert a double crochet. So this kind of helps me have like a uniform round without a weird gap. So I did add a granny cluster to the seam. Now in the next space between clusters, you're going to insert a cluster. And then from here, it's pretty smooth sailing, just a cluster in each space until you get to the opposite seam. So we're going to do this around our head opening. Okay, and I'm coming around to the opposite seam. I'm going to zoom in this time. So as you can see, it would be like a really weird gap if I just skipped over. So that's why I'm going to squeeze in this cluster to the right, middle, and left of the seam. So here's my first double crochet to the right of the seam. I'm going to insert a double crochet directly into the seam, and then a double crochet to the left of the seam. And this just kind of helps not create that weird gap. So now turn your work to work on the opposite side of your sweater. And we're going to keep doing clusters all the way around to the beginning. So insert a cluster in the next space and repeat this around to the end. Okay, and once you get around to the end, just slip stitch to the beginning, chain 3 to close. I'm going to slip stitch a couple more times until I'm in the space between clusters. And then I'm just going to repeat these cluster rounds until I get about, I don't know, 5 inches or enough that I can fold over my collar. But it's pretty easy. You could also just stop at 1 round if you prefer. But I'm going to add several more so I can fold it over. And I'm going to do this off camera. Okay, so I finished my collar and most of my sweater. I'm going to work on weaving my ends in. And again, I do apologize for extending the length and losing that video recording, but if your sweater is too cropped, it really is easy to add extra granny rounds on the bottom. You're also welcome to add a ribbed border on the bottom as well, but I just opted for a single crochet border. But I'm going to go ahead and block my my sweater, and I will show you guys what it looks like. Okay, and this is my finished sweater. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope it wasn't a terribly awful or confusing video. So thank you for your time, and I will see you next time.